The first time Cadet Instructor Veth-Orin Sallas heard a human laugh at a near-death experience, he thought something had gone wrong with the translation system. The human in question was Cadet Zara Osei. She had just survived the Phase 2 tactical scenario by a margin that the assessment team later calculated as approximately 2 seconds. 2 seconds between a successful completion and a critical failure that would have resulted in her removal from the trial. She emerged from the scenario room, checked her hands as if confirming they were still attached, and then made a sound that Sallas had never heard from any species in 6 intake cycles. It was not a cry, it was not a groan. It was not the controlled exhale of a being managing the aftermath of extreme stress. It was a laugh. Short, sharp, genuine, and immediately followed by her saying, "That was the closest I have ever come to failing at something I was certain I would succeed at, and I find that hilarious for reasons I cannot entirely explain." Then she walked to the water station and drank an entire bottle without stopping. Sallas stood very still for a moment. He said to no one in particular, "That was a laugh." The assessment technician beside him said, "Yes." She nearly failed, she laughed. The technician said, "That appears to be what happened, yes." Sallas added it to his mental file under a new category that he labeled, "Things I Need to Understand Better." He was not the only person who had noticed. In the 17 years since humanity joined the wider galactic community, the phenomenon had been documented extensively, studied with varying degrees of rigor, and discussed in approximately 43 academic papers, 7 of which were in the medical literature because the initial assumption had been that something was wrong with the humans who did it. Nothing was wrong with them. That was, in fact, the unsettling part. The paper that came closest to capturing it was written by Dr. Veth-Orin Sallas, the archivist and researcher whose grandmother had corresponded with humans for decades. She had spent 3 years embedded with human military and emergency response teams, observing and documenting with the specific patient attention that the Oranthos family brought to everything. Her paper was titled, "Morbid Humor as Adaptive Mechanism in Homo Sapiens," and it opened with a line that became the most quoted sentence in 20 years of cross-species behavioral literature. It said humans laugh at things that are trying to kill them. The remarkable fact is not that they do this. The remarkable fact is that it works. The paper had been downloaded 400,000 times in its first year. A significant portion of those downloads were from military intelligence divisions. This is what the paper documented. Human beings, when subjected to extreme stress, fear, pain, or imminent mortality, exhibit a behavioral response that has no parallel in any other known sapient species. They produce humor. Specifically, they produce humor about the thing that is trying to harm them. Not all of them, not always. The response is more common in some contexts than others, more prevalent in certain human cultures, more reliable in individuals with specific personality profiles and training backgrounds. But it is common enough, and reliable enough and functional enough that it has to be understood as something other than malfunction. Dr. Veth-Orin Sallas had spent 3 years figuring out what it was instead. Her conclusion, it is a cognitive reframing mechanism. When a human makes a joke about a thing that is threatening them, they are not minimizing the threat. They are asserting a specific relationship to it. The joke says, "I see you, I acknowledge you, I am afraid of you. And I am also in this moment larger than you because I can hold you in my mind simultaneously as something terrifying and something absurd, and anything I can hold in my mind that way does not fully control me." She wrote, "The laugh is not evidence that the human doesn't understand the danger. It is evidence that they do, and that their response to understanding the danger is to refuse to be only afraid of it." She wrote, "From the outside, this looks like recklessness. From the inside, according to every human I interviewed, it is the opposite. It is the specific skill of being afraid and functional at the same time. The laugh is how they confirm to themselves that the fear has not taken over. She wrote, I watched a human emergency medic respond to a catastrophic equipment failure during a critical procedure, repair the equipment in 4 minutes while maintaining the procedure with the other hand, stabilize the patient, and then tell a joke about the equipment that made 2 colleagues laugh. I asked her afterward why. She laughed, because if I didn't laugh, I would think about how close that was, and thinking about how close that was takes time I don't have, and the patient needed me present. The laugh was how I stayed present. She wrote, I do not know of any other species that has developed this specific capability. The closest analog is the Thesson practice of ritualized complaint, which serves a similar function but requires a significant time investment. The human laugh takes less than a second and can be deployed in the middle of an active crisis without interrupting the activity that is managing the crisis. She wrote, it is, in the most literal sense, the most efficient stress management tool I have ever documented. The paper concluded with the line, what makes the rest of the galaxy nervous is not that humans laugh at death. It is that the laughing appears to be working. When Sallas read the paper, he added the entire thing to his mental file and then sat in his office for an hour thinking about 6 intake cycles and how many things he had observed that the paper explained. He thought about Zara Osei emerging from the Phase 2 scenario room and laughing. He thought about every human cadet he had instructed who had, at some point in the training cycle, produced that sound in circumstances that no other species produced it in. He thought about the specific quality of human performance under conditions that produced the laugh. The humans who laughed in the hard moments, he realized, were almost always the humans who performed better in those moments than their baseline capacity suggested they should. Not every time, but consistently enough to be a pattern. He added that observation to the file and sent a note to Dr. Veth-Orin Sallas, saying he thought her paper was the most useful thing written about humans in the last decade, and asking if she had data on the performance correlation. She replied the next day, I have 37 cases. The correlation holds in 34 of them. I did not include it in the paper because 37 cases is not enough for a strong statistical claim, but I believe it is real and I am collecting more data. Would you be willing to share your cadet assessment records? Oh, yes. This was the beginning of a research collaboration that would eventually produce a follow-up paper, but that is a later part of the story. The current part of the story is about what happened when the laugh got studied by people who were not trying to understand it, but to counter it. The Reth Combat Studies Division had 102 years of data on human military behavior. It did not have a section on the laugh. This was, in retrospect, the most significant gap in the 2,000-page report. After the Karath Corridor operation, Fleet Admiral Veth-Orin Sallas had ordered the Combat Studies Division to begin a new report. The new report was supposed to address everything the old one had missed. Division analyst Veth-Orin Sallas had been writing it for 3 months when he first encountered the laugh in his source material. He was reviewing the archive recording of the Karath Corridor engagement, specifically the 6 hours of Captain Webb's public broadcast. 4 hours and 27 minutes into the broadcast, there was a moment. 2 junior officers were visible in the background of Webb's transmission frame. One of them was checking a system display. The other was eating something from a small container. The one checking the display said something too quiet for the transmission to pick up clearly. The one eating looked up, looked at the tactical display showing 318 Reth warships in formation outside the corridor, and laughed. Not a short sound, A full laugh, the kind that involves the whole body, brief but genuine. Then he went back to eatings. The Save watched this clip 12 times. He wrote in his notes, at the 4-hour and 27-minute mark, a human crew member aboard a vessel facing a fleet of 318 warships laughed at the tactical display. He then ate a snack. I do not know what to do with this information, but I believe it is important. He sent the clip to Dr. Veth-Orin Sallas, whose work he had encountered through the academic channels. She responded within the hour. This is excellent documentation. This is exactly what I have been trying to explain. What you are watching is a crew member who has assessed the tactical situation, understood the stakes, and chosen to respond with humor because humor is how he confirms to himself that the stakes have not paralyzed him. He is still eating because eating is a normal activity and performing a normal activity, while the abnormal situation continues, is how humans signal to themselves and each other that they are functional. The laugh is not evidence that he is not afraid. The laugh is evidence that he is afraid and has decided what to do. All about it. You should know that the vessel he was on completed the engagement successfully. That crew performed at a high level throughout the 18-hour situation. The laugh at 4 hours 27 was one of several I noted in the archive footage of that crew. Do you want to know what his rank was? Save said, tell me. He was the weapons officer. He was, throughout the engagement, the crew member responsible for ensuring the vessel's defensive systems remained operational. His systems performed without failure. He did his job for 18 hours against 318 warships, and at 4 hours 27 he looked at the display and laughed and went back to his snack. That is what functional looks like under extreme pressure for this species. Save sat with this for a long time. Then he wrote in the new report, Section 7, the behavioral anomaly the previous report did not document. He wrote for 4 hours straight. Meanwhile, in a different part of the galaxy, the laugh was creating a different kind of problem. The Thessan Collective's diplomatic corps had assigned one of their most experienced diplomats, a being named Arch-Coordinator Veth-Orin Sallas, to manage the relationship with the human colonial authority in the outer sectors. Veth-Orin Sallas had been a diplomat for 40 years. He had negotiated with 46 different species. He had a reputation for being unflappable, which in the diplomatic context meant he had seen enough unusual things that unusual things no longer unsettled him. He had not, before his first meeting with the human colonial authority, spent much time with humans. The meeting was a routine quarterly review of commercial agreements. 6 people on each side, a conference table, prepared materials and agenda. 20 minutes in, the human representative who was leading the review, a woman named Commissioner Adiz Akoroweb, who was the daughter of the same Adiz Akoro, who had once asked a research team to keep copies of their recordings outside the institutional system, made a small error in her presentation. She cited a figure from the wrong quarter. The error was minor and easily corrected. What happened next was not in any of Veth-Orin Sallas's 40 years of diplomatic experience. Commissioner Akoroweb looked at the figure, looked at her notes, and said, "And that number is completely wrong, which is what happens when you prepare materials at 11 o'clock the night before a morning meeting, and I apologize." She then laughed at herself. Not at the room, not as a performance. At herself, in the specific way that humans laugh at their own mistakes, which is the laugh of someone who is aware of the absurdity of their own situation and is choosing to find it funny rather than mortifying. She corrected the figure. She continued the presentation. Veth-Orin Sallas watched this for a moment and then wrote in his private meeting notes, "The human laughed at her own error in front of 6 representatives of the Thessan Collective. She then continued as if this was a normal thing to do. I do not know what the correct diplomatic interpretation of this is. Filing for later review. After the meeting, he asked his cultural briefing officer about it. The briefing officer, who had actually read Dr. Veth-Orin Sallas' paper, said she was not embarrassed in the way you would expect. She acknowledged the error, made it clear she was aware of it, and moved on. The laugh was how she communicated that the error was not catastrophic and that she was comfortable enough in the room to be honest about her own mistakes. Veth-Orin Sallas said she laughed at herself in a diplomatic meeting. The briefing officer said, yes, it is actually a positive signal. Humans who laugh at themselves in professional context are typically more confident and more trusted than ones who don't, because the laugh communicates that they are not performing a version of themselves. They are just themselves. Veth-Orin Sallas said, that sounds like it should be a vulnerability. The briefing officer said, in most diplomatic contexts it would be. In human social dynamics, it is the opposite. Acknowledging imperfection publicly communicates that you do not need to be perfect, which communicates that you are operating from a position of genuine capability rather than managed presentation. The laugh at a mistake is saying, I see this mistake, I am not threatened by you having seen it, and we can all move on now. Veth-Orin Sallas thought about this for a while. And the laugh at a near-death experience. The briefing officer said, the same principle, larger stakes. I am not threatened by having nearly died. We can move on now. Veth-Orin Sallas said, that is philosophically difficult. The briefing officer said, for us, yes. For them, it appears to be a habit. How does something that large become a habit? The briefing officer said, practic. Apparently. Veth-Orin Sallas went home and read Dr. Veth-Orin Sallas' paper. Then he went to bed and thought about it for most of the night. Then he got up and wrote a memo to the collective's diplomatic training division that said, I believe our diplomatic preparation for interactions with humans has been significantly insufficient, and I have identified the specific gap. The gap is that we have been training our people to manage human emotional expression as a diplomatic variable when human emotional expression is in fact a communication system that we do not fully understand. I am requesting a full review of our preparation materials and would like to propose a training module based on the attached paper. The paper was Dr. Veth-Orin Sallas. The training module was developed. It was the first diplomatic training module in the Thesan collective's history to include a section on when a laugh is a good sign. Back at the academy, Sallas was conducting his end-of-cycle review when he encountered something in the records that made him stop. He was reviewing the performance data from the current intake cohort, cross-referenced with the behavior logs that the academy's monitoring system maintained. Standard review. He had done it 6 times before. He was looking for the performance correlation that Dr. Veth-Orin Sallas had described, the connection between the laugh under pressure and the performance outcome. He found 31 instances in the current cycle's records where a human cadet had produced the response in a documented high-stress situation. In 28 of those 31 instances, the performance outcome in the subsequent assessment was at or above the cadet's baseline. In the 3 exceptions, there were specific contextual factors that Dr. Veth-Orin Sallas' paper had identified as modifiers: physical exhaustion beyond a threshold or isolation from team context. The correlation was real. He sent the data to Dr. Veth-Orin Sallas with a note that said, 31 cases, 28 with the correlation holding. I think we have enough for the statistical claim now. She wrote back within the hour, I am on the next transport. Do not analyze the data without me. He wrote back, I would not dream of it. When she arrived, they worked together for 3 days. They produced a joint paper that was, in Sallas's assessment, the most interesting thing he had contributed to in 17 years as a cadet instructor. The paper documented the laugh. It documented the performance correlation. It documented the mechanism Dr. Veth-Orin Sallas had identified, the cognitive reframing that allowed humans to hold fear and function simultaneously. And it documented something new that the cross-referencing of the Academy data with the broader research record had revealed. The laugh was not just individual. When one human in a group produced the response, the others in the group showed measurable shifts in their own stress indicators within approximately 30 seconds. Not always, not every context, but reliably enough that the pattern was real. The laugh was contagious, not in the trivial sense that laughter is often socially contagious. In the functional sense, when one human in a group laughed at a threat, the group's collective stress response moderated, the group performed better. Dr. Veth-Orin Sallas wrote that section herself, at midnight on the second day, and called Sallas in to read it before she continued. I want to make sure I am saying this correctly, because I think it is the most important thing in the paper. Oh, he read it. You are saying the laugh is a social tool, not just a personal one. I am saying the laugh is a signal. The individual who laughs is not just managing their own fear. They are signaling to the group that the fear is manageable, that the situation, however dire, is something that can be held with a degree of lightness. And the group receives that signal and responds to it. The human who laughs in the hard moment is not performing courage. They are sharing it. I believe this is why it makes the rest of the galaxy nervous. It is not just that they do it. It is that when they do it, it spreads. And a group of beings that can share the reduction of fear across a crisis is a group that performs differently than a group that cannot. Sallas thought about the Phase 2 scenario, Zara Osei emerging from the room and laughing. He thought about the two cadets in the adjoining staging area who had looked up when they heard her, and the specific thing that had happened in the room. When she laughed after Phase 2, the other cadets in the staging area, I was watching them. Dr. Veth-Orin Sallas said, "What happened?" They relaxed. I noted it at the time and could not explain it. Three cadets who were waiting for their own assessment turn, and when the human cadet emerged and laughed, they relaxed. Two of them performed above their baseline in their own assessments that followed. One of them was Dorith, ranked 5th. He performed in Phase 2 at a level that was his best assessment result in the cycle. I attributed it to natural variation. Dr. Veth-Orin Sallas looked at him. It was not natural variation. No, I don't think it was. The laugh gave him permission to be less afraid, and being less afraid let him perform better. She did not know she was doing that for him. I am fairly certain she had no intention beyond managing her own response, but the effect was real. She looked at her notes. I want to add something to the paper that I have been thinking about since I read your data, and I want your honest assessment of whether it is too speculative for an academic paper. Tell me. The laugh is a specific adaptation. It is functional. It produces measurable benefits for individuals and groups under stress. It is common enough to be a species characteristic. It has been evolving for at least 100,000 years based on the human historical record. I want to argue that it is not a quirk or an anomaly. I want to argue that it is one of the core reasons this species survived 200,000 years of nearly destroying themselves repeatedly. Not the only reason, not even the main reason, but a significant contributing factor, because a species that can laugh at the thing trying to kill it is a species that remains functional under conditions that would reduce other species to paralysis. And I want to note that the galactic community's discomfort with the laugh is not irrational. It is correctly sensing that it is looking at something it does not fully understand. A species that functions differently under threat than any other known species. That gets better in some measurable ways when conditions are at their worst. And that shares that capacity across groups through a mechanism as simple as a laugh. It makes the universe nervous because it should. It is genuinely unusual. The universe has never seen anything quite like it before. Sallas said that is not too speculative. That is exactly right. You are sure? I have been watching human cadets for 6 intake cycles. Every cycle I think I understand them, and every cycle something happens that I don't have a category for. The laugh was always the thing I had no category for. You've given me the category, and it is larger than I expected. Put it in the paper. She put it in the paper. The paper was published 3 months later in the Journal of Interspecies Behavioral Studies. It was downloaded 460,000 times in its first year, surpassing the first paper by a significant margin. The most downloaded section was the last one, which was not the statistical analysis or the mechanism description or even the historical evolutionary argument. It was the section called What the Laugh Actually Means. Dr. Veth-Orin Sallas had written it alone, at 2 in the morning on the final day, because she said the other sections required the data, and the data required both of them, but this section required something else, which was the 3 years she had spent watching, and the specific thing she had come to understand that the data alone did not say. It said, when a human laughs at the thing that is trying to kill them, they are making a statement that no other species makes in that moment. They are saying, I am still here, not in the sense of mere survival, in the sense of full presence. I am afraid and I am in this moment, and I am still capable of finding something in this moment worth laughing at. The fear has not taken all of me. There is still a part of me that is standing slightly outside the fear and looking at it and seeing it for what it is, which is serious and real, and also, from the right angle, absurd. That part, the part that can find the absurdity in the worst moments, is not a luxury. It is not a sign of not caring. It is the part that keeps everything else functioning. It is the part that says to the body and the mind, we are still in this together, and we are going to be okay, even if okay means something different than it meant before this started. It said, I watched a human pilot spend 4 hours flying into a debris field to recover the crew of a vessel that had been destroyed by a navigational failure. The debris field was actively dangerous. The recovery took 4 separate approaches. After the second approach, which came within seconds of destroying her own vessel, she said on the open channel, I would like everyone to know that I am having an extremely interesting afternoon. 3 crew members on the recovering vessel laughed. She made all 4 approaches, she recovered the crew, she landed the vessel without further incident. When I asked her afterward about the comment on the open channel, I needed to know that we were still a crew and not just 4 people who were scared. Laugh told me we were still a crew. If they had not laughed, I do not know if I could have made the third approach. It said, what makes the universe nervous is not that this species laughs at death. It is that the laughing holds something together that would otherwise fall apart. And a species that has learned to hold itself together through the worst moments, to use the worst moments as the raw material for something that keeps the group functional, is a species that does not break the way other species break. It said, in 200,000 years of nearly killing themselves repeatedly, of building things and watching them fail and building again, of losing people and continuing, of facing what should have been their end and laughing at it, they developed this tool. This specific, strange, genuinely unsettling tool. It said the tool is not a weapon, it is not a strategy, it is not a diplomatic technique, though it functions as one. It is older than any of those things. It is what a species sounds like when it has decided, somewhere very deep and very old, that it is not going to be only afraid of the things that frighten it. It said that sound is a laugh. It said, and yes, it makes the universe nervous. It said the universe is correct to be nervous. It said not because the laugh is a threat, because the laugh is a proof. A proof that whatever comes at them, whatever the cost, whatever the circumstances, some part of them is always going to be standing just outside it, looking at it clearly, seeing both how serious it is and how absurd it is, and choosing to name the absurdity out loud. It said, a species that can do that is a species that does not fully break. And the universe, which has been breaking species since before any of us have records, does not quite know what to do with something that does not fully break. It said, neither do I entirely. It said, I have been studying them for 3 years. I understand the mechanism. I have the data. I can tell you exactly what the laugh is doing physiologically and socially and cognitively. It said, I still cannot entirely explain what it is like to be in a room when someone does it. To be standing near a human who has just come very close to something catastrophic and who looks at it and laughs. It said, the feeling is not contagious in the way the data describes when I am in the room. It is something else. It is the feeling of being in the presence of something that has decided very thoroughly to be alive, and that is making that decision loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. It said, I think that is what the universe is nervous about. It said it is not the laugh itself. It said it is the decision. The paper was read by Cadet Zara Osei 3 months after it was published, on a quiet evening in her second-year dormitory at the academy. She read it once all the way through. Then she went to the section on what the laugh means and read it again, slowly. Then she closed the paper and sat quietly for a while. Dorothy, who had become something between a study partner and a friend over the 2 years since the trial, was at the adjacent desk reviewing tactical assessment records. He said without looking up, "What are you reading?" "A paper about why we laugh at things that are trying to kill us. And it says we do it so the group knows we are still a crew." Well, he looked up. After Phase 2, when I came out and laughed, the paper says it probably helped you in your assessment because it told you the fear was survivable. Dorothy was quiet for a moment. I have thought about that day. I have not been able to explain why my Phase 2 performance was significantly above my prior assessments. I attributed it to adrenaline patterns. Apparently, it was also me laughing. You did not know you were doing that for me. I had no idea. I was just relieved I had not failed. And you laughed because you were relieved. I laughed because I was still here and still myself and still capable of finding the situation funny, and finding it funny meant the situation had not taken me completely. And apparently that communicated something to you that helped you stay yourself too. I find that remarkable, that the thing we do when we are afraid and still functional, that it spreads, that it is not just a private thing. Dorothy was quiet for a moment. The paper says it makes the universe nervous. Apparently, yes. Does that concern you? Oh, she thought about this. My mother was in a colonial defense force. She and the crew of her vessel held an engagement zone for 4 hours against a fleet they were not going to beat, transmitting data, buying time for a conversation that eventually built the Ardennes Accord. I do not know what she said in those 4 hours. I was not there. But I knew her, and I know that at some point in those 4 hours she probably laughed at something. Not because she was not afraid. It because she was afraid and also still herself. And being still yourself in the worst moment is the thing. That is the whole thing. If that makes the universe nervous, it is because the universe has not yet understood that being nervous is the wrong response to it. Dorothy said, what is the right response? I think the right response is what Instructor Sallas has been doing for 6 intake cycles, and what Dr. Veth-Orin Sallas spent 3 years doing, which is paying close attention and trying to understand it properly. The universe is nervous because it does not understand it yet. When it understands it, I think it will feel something different. What will it feel? I don't know, reassured maybe. Because if you are going to be in the universe with something, it is better to be in it with something that does not fully break, even if the sound it makes when it refuses to break is unusual. Even if the sound is a laugh. Dorothy considered this for a while. Then in the Keth tradition, there is a concept that does not have a perfect translation. The closest I can render it in standard is the strength that comes from knowing you are temporary. What does that mean? It means that knowing something will end does not diminish it. It focuses it. A warrior who knows they are mortal fights differently than one who believes otherwise, because the mortal warrior is present in a way the other is not. They are fully there because they understand that there will be a last time for everything and they want this time to matter. I have been watching you for 2 years. The laugh is related to that, I think. You laugh because you know you are temporary and you choose to be present anyway. And the present includes the absurdity of the situation and the fear and the effort and all of it at once. Zara looked at him. That is the best description I have ever heard of what it feels like from the inside. I have been thinking about it for 2 years. I had good source material. Oh, she laughed. It was the laugh, the specific one, the one that the paper had documented and studied and attempted to explain. Dorothy looked at her. He felt in his own way the thing the paper described, not the laugh itself, the effect of it, the signal it carried. He felt the room settle slightly. He felt something that was not quite reassurance and not quite calm, but was the specific quality of being near someone who is fully present and fully themselves, and laughing at the edges of the situation that cannot touch the center. He went back to his tactical assessment records. She went back to the paper. Outside the window, the academy's grounds were quiet in the late evening. Somewhere in 17 external archive systems, Dr. Veth-Orin Sallas' paper continued to be downloaded. Somewhere in the Reth Combat Studies Division, analyst Save was writing Section 12 of the new report. Somewhere in the Thesson Collective's diplomatic training program, a module was being taught for the first time about when a laugh is a good sign. And somewhere in the Karath corridor, 31 human vessels were going about their normal commercial support operations, and the crew members were eating snacks and checking displays, and occasionally, when something almost went wrong, or when a transit was particularly complicated, or when the operational tempo produced one of those moments that could go either way, laughing.